Refugee Action Coalition Sydney is holding a protest rally due to concerns of the wanted closure of the Manus and Nauru detention centres at Sydney's Town Hall on October the 11th. This event has been sparked by concerns over the refugee crisis in Europe. Due to this, the Australian government has been pressured into allowing 12,000 more refugees into the country. However, many people are adamant that still not enough is being done to help the refugees in Syria. The Refugee Action Coalition Sydney have been running for over 15 years and have since had many successful campaigns influencing the Australian government's decisions surrounding refugees and border protection policies. Since the turnover of Prime Ministership to Malcolm Turnbull, their biggest concern is the new government's position on prioritising Christian refugees over Muslims. With 6 guest speakers and over 6,000 attendees, the event may have an impact on Australian federal politicians.
I tend to think personally that if people arrive in Australia, we're a signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, and so we've agreed that we'll take these asylum seekers. With Nauru and Manus, there's been so many atrocities. You can't say that they've been places that have been well managed at all. Ever since the start, there's been so many scandals and atrocities. There's been people getting minor infections like cuts on their feet, and just dying from that. There's been all these sexual assaults that have been happening. The UN's actually got guidelines for refugee camps and how you set them up. We're actually one of the richest countries in the world per capita. So it's we're evading so much responsibility we could have to help people, especially poorer countries, and who are taking on way more than their share. And these are people who are in need, and as sort of the richest countries in the world, it's our responsibility.
Senior Policy Officer from the Refugee Council of Australia, Lucy Morgan, also agrees that there is a need for the closure of the Manus Island and Nauru detention centres.
And as we increasingly hear stories of serious cases of abuse and of violence happening against refugees who are detained in Nauru and in Manus Island, I think it really is building up to the point where we must take urgent action soon to protect refugees, even their basic safety, and prevent further harm to the people who have come here seeking our help. And I think that's really what the rally and what organisations like ours and others have been calling for a long time. But as we've seen more and more of these types of stories coming out, is becoming ever more urgent. And many of us are very, very concerned about the trajectory that our policies have taken and the level of harm that is being inflicted on people who've come here to seek Australia's help and protection. As to whether it actually has an impact on their decision making, I suppose that's a question for them rather than for us, but we would hope that it would be a demonstration to the government that there is a need to rethink what they are doing, and simply business as usual with offshore processing and with detention is not good enough now. We really need action to protect people. It's also important, I think, to keep Australia's issues in perspective here. If you look at a country like Greece, for example, they're seeing 5,000 to 6,000 people arrive per day. So the numbers that we're receiving in Australia are small in terms of our own migration program, but also small in terms of global numbers. So there's no reason to fear that providing a decent level of protection and support to the relatively small numbers of people coming here is going to have any real difference or make any real difference to the quality of life of other Australians.
Discord over current federal policies surrounding the treatment of refugees in Australia reflect the changing attitudes of Australia's citizens. Thousands of supporters of the RAC and their push to close Manus Island and Nauru detention centres came to the refugee rally for many different reasons.
I'm here because I think that we can do way better than what we're doing right now.
I'm here today because I support refugees and they should be free.
We're here because we're absolutely appalled at the detention of refugee children, both in mainland Australia and offshore in Nauru.
The Refugee Council also acknowledges the need for government recognition, especially since there has been a turnover in Prime Ministership to Malcolm Turnbull.
To say at the moment the new Prime Minister hasn't made any announcements to indicate that he or his government will be adopting a different approach to refugee policies, which I think is quite disappointing. There really was a need to address some of the serious shortcomings in our treatment of asylum seekers and to ensure people, especially those who are sent to Nauru and Manus Island, are protected. So we certainly would see a need for that and see that the Prime Minister would be in a good position now to take that action, but we certainly haven't heard any indication at the moment that that is going to be the case.
Whether or not this rally does cause a discrepancy between federal politicians over border protection issues is yet to be seen. Sophie Howe reporting.